Okay, we've got a huge content today, so I'm going to officially get started. So welcome, everyone. Thank you all for joining. This is a tactical guide for building a PMO, how to run a successful PMO. And let's get started. So my name is Bill Dow. I have 27 years of hands-on experience. I've been at Microsoft for 12 years, AT&T, worked for the British Columbia government for 9 years, City of Seattle for multiple years. I've been a presenter at several PMO symposiums, several Project Summit Worlds. I have an MPUG presentation coming up this Wednesday, so if you're part of the Microsoft Project Users Group. I've been on the radio. I'm also a 4-time author, the PMO Lifecycle, Building, Running, and Shutting Down, Project Management Communication Tools, the Tactical Guide for Building a PMO, and then my first book back in 2008 is a Project Management Communication Bible. So super, super excited to share with you again today from the material of the PMO Lifecycle. So we've got a great agenda. We're going to walk you through these 6 items. We'll talk about building a PMO very, very briefly. Then we'll go into running a PMO, and we'll talk about PMO reporting. We'll go into PMO day-to-day operations. We'll talk about PMO resources. And then we'll do a wrap-up and we'll provide you some more information. Sound good? Excellent. All right, so let's step back briefly and talk about building a PMO. And so when we went through that webinar, and I know some of you guys were on that as well, when we went through that webinar, we basically presented you with 12 steps. And we said these are the foundation of building a PMO. You have to start with a plan, obtain executive support, create your PMO staples, select your 4 Ps of your PMO, which includes your methodologies, select your PMO model, create your PMO maturity model, which is different from your the other model, obtain your resources, select your training, implement your methodologies, select your reporting, select your tools and processes, and you're done. Ton of work there. That is a ton of work. Building a PMO takes a lot of effort. But these are the 12 steps, and these are the foundational steps that will help you build a solid PMO into the future. Guys, remember those? And did you build those steps? Did you actually go back and build those? All right, well, if you didn't, we got to go back and stop. We got to go back and do those right now, and I'll just wait for you guys. We got all day. I'll wait for you. Clearly, I'm kidding, right? But these are the big steps, and these are the foundational steps of building a PMO. And so every PMO I see and every PMO manager I talk to, we talk about these things. What are you doing about maturity? What are you doing about your model, right? What tools do you have? What reporting do you have? Right, so regardless of Agile or IT or manufacturing or research, these are the core components for building a PMO. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to walk you through running a PMO, but it's based on those 12 components, right? It's really based on, hey, I've got the foundation in place, and what I can do now is I can build off that foundation, okay? So what I've done is I've really created 4 buckets on how to run a PMO. So I've done the 12, they're in place. Some can be mature, some could be not so mature. That's fine, but we've got that foundation in place. And now we step into running a PMO. Make sense? Yeah, so you got to have the foundation in place. So here are the 4 steps of running a PMO. Develop executive reports, develop your PMO specific reports, and we'll talk about that. Jump into your PMO day-to-day operations. So what do we do day-to-day? And then finally, your PMO resources, your mentoring, your buddy systems, and all the things that you can do for your resources. That's it. It's easy. 4 steps, and you've built yourself, and now you're running a PMO. What do you guys think? Pretty easy? Actually not. There's a tremendous amount of work with that. But I've broken it down to make it into 4 easy steps, allowing you to tackle these things in a very controlled manner. Okay, so let's keep going. So the first thing in step 1 is executive reports. This is a wild card. Every executive will require their own sets of reports. But as a proactive PMO manager, you're going to want to start with something and then allow that to tweak and tweak and tweak. But every executive, and I've worked with them for years and years, they've all got their own flavor of reports, but there's some things that you can consider while working with your executives. So one of the key components, and I can't stress this enough, one of the key components of running a successful PMO is keeping your executives happy. Right? They'll want scorecards, they'll want calendars, they'll want dashboards, right? But you want to get the executives the reports they need to help you drive your PMO, right? And so you want that exposure and you want that executive confidence that you're running a successful PMO and they know where they can get the data to see what's happening across a portfolio of programs and projects. So what are some of the reports that you can give your executives? Well, the first is a PMO dashboard. This is a simple report to create. It's easy to set up. It's got colors. It's got the main 6 areas: project health, project schedule, project scope, cost, quality, adoption. You've got the names of the projects. You've got some notes about it. But very, very quickly and at a glance, your executives will see exactly what and how projects are tracking. And they're going to love that. They're going to love the colors. They're going to love the simplicity of this. You can put it in Excel. You can put it on a SharePoint. But you're going to want to set up a dashboard on how your projects are tracking as soon as possible. And it's one of the first reports I feel you need to set up and get set up immediately for your executives. Have you guys seen that kind of report before? Yeah, very simple. Set them up before, used them before. Very, very powerful, and they love the colors. They love the simplicity of it and seeing exactly what's happening. The next is a milestone report, and this is another very simple report. Again, you've got your projects. Now, what you're seeing are the phases of a waterfall project. But how simple would this be to create an agile? How simple would this be to create the construction or research or manufacturing? The executives can see the colors, they can see where projects are, and how often do you get asked, hey, when is your project going into dev? Or when do you go live? Or how's the Project Odyssey project? Whatever the case may be, right? You're gonna wanna know exactly where the projects are tracking. They're going to want to know how things are moving along, what's in red, what's in yellow, and where they are in the stage of the project. Again, slight notes, not a ton of notes that you put there, but think about, you're seeing a waterfall version, but think about how easy it would be to show other methodologies: construction, research, agile, scaled agile, whatever the case may be. So a PMO milestone report is really a valuable report to get set up immediately for executives as well. Okay. The next is a resource report. Now, depending if your PMO is full of resources, meaning contractor, vendors, right, suppliers, or even staff as well. But again, a resource report is another report that executives will want to know. When are they rolling on? When are they rolling off? What are some out of the office activities? Bill's on vacation, Roger's off, right? If these are contractors and they're costing, and you've got some budgeting issues or you've got some concerns around budget, a PMO resource when people are rolling on and rolling off is another very valuable executive report. So again, another example of, of an executive report that you get set up and going immediately, and something that your executives will be asking for as you roll through and drive a successful PMO. So regardless of the reports, right? Dashboards, milestones, you know, every executive is going to constantly ask you for reports. And as a proactive PMO manager, you need to be on top of your reports. But there's some things that you can think about when you're building your reports. They should have tons of color. But you're also seeing that you've got the text in there as well. And so, for example, you may have some executives that you may or may not consider, but they may be colorblind. And if they're colorblind, adding this text like you're seeing here will be very, very beneficial to them. They should be quick and easy to consume. They should have valuable information. They should be easy to locate. They should be easy for your resources to provide updates on. right? So these are some of the goals and some of these executive reports that you're going to want to create, and you're going to want to get set up as soon as possible within your PMO. But again, regardless of how many reports and how many you produce, your executives will always want another report. They will always continue to ask you, hey, these are great, but can we put it in a dashboard? Hey, these are great, can you put it on a SharePoint site? Whatever the case may be, you as a proactive PMO manager from a reporting perspective, you need to be on top of this and continue to be on top of this as you roll through and drive your PMO forward. Make sense? You guys like those? Yeah, excellent. Okay, and again, we'll field questions and stuff at the end. So as we summarize, executive reporting is critical in keeping a PMO going for years. I can't stress that enough, right? Executive reporting is also a continual process. This is not a one and done, right? You're going to always want to be on top of that. You're going to want to spend your time with your executives. You're going to want to put reports out. They may work, they may not work. And again, another key question that you could be asking your executives, are they text friendly? Are they graphics friendly? Do they want reports that are all heavy on text? They want Excel data that have rows and rows of data? Or do they like charts? Do they like graphs? Do they like colors? And so you're going to want to have that conversation. You could produce the most beautiful reports in the world, but if they don't reside and they don't resonate with your executives, then there's a problem. And so have that text versus graphics conversation, right? That's a critical conversation that you could have and really help with your reporting with your executives going forward. Make sense? Excellent. Okay, so now we look at PMO specific reports. So we've got the executive reports, right? But now you're going to need a combination. So you're the PMO manager, you're running your PMO, you're doing these executive reports and they're working out fine. That's good, but what do you need specifically to run a PMO? What on top of the executive reports? So once you have those specific reports nailed down and your executives are happy and you're feeling good, some of these reports that you set up may be too detailed or not at the right level, right? So you may have some reports that you need specifically for your PMO that your executives are like, oh, that's way too much data. So most, and I would say almost every PMO manager will have their own specific needs, right, for their environment. So what are some of those reports? Again, you're going to start with the dashboard. You're going to start with what you've done for the executives, right? They're just as valuable, just as important for you. But what's that next click down? And so I'd say a dependency tracker. I'd say this is a huge part of how we really fail in a lot of our projects. And so I'd have a project dependency tracker at the project level, and I'd have that rolled up to a PMO. And so as a PMO manager, you can see all the projects with the various dependencies. And it's not a very hard thing to do. You can have the PMO or the project managers add their own dependencies to a common log. But you as a PMO manager that's looking broad, it would be very, very valuable information where you can look at this and you can step in and see where you could help. So a dependency log is one of the multiple reports that is a key for PMO managers, very specific to the PMOs. The executives are probably not going to need it, but very, very important for you as a PMO manager to have that cross view of your organization. So knowing what projects are related to one another, where are they red, where are they yellow, and where can you step in and help? Okay, so again, specific organizations, right, are going to have tons and tons of reports out there, and there's like just too many of them that will be specific to what you need. But one of the things I find that PMO managers also forget is they forget about all the software they're running, right? So we've got good portfolio management software, we've got project management software, we've got lots of software out there. And what about all the valuable reports that come out of that software, right? And so you look at Project Server, or you look at Primavera and all the various big named portfolio tools, well, they all come with tons and tons of reporting. So as a PMO manager, you should be leveraging that. If you're leveraging the software, you're also you should be leveraging the reports in that. And then think about your reports in three buckets: portfolio, program, and project, right? And we actually cover this in the building, but it's the same scenario. You've got portfolio reports, program reports, and project reports, and eventually, not right away, but eventually they all lead to dashboards. And you're going to want that automated dashboard set up so you're actually getting that information out real time. And so when you think about the reporting, we talk about past reports being roadmaps, being planning reports or performance reports, current reports being status reports, budget reports, schedule reports, or future reports being earned value or performance reports. And so you've got those three buckets, and then eventually you're going to move them to dashboards. Don't rush to dashboards, although they are getting a lot easier with Power BI and Tableau and all the various great dashboarding reporting out there. But you're going to want to get the manual reports going first, and then again move to the dashboards later. So get it working and then move to that dashboards. But there's just a ton of different types of reports you can get. And then the other caution to this, as we summarize, is don't get tied down in creating massive amount of reports, right? It's important to know exactly how your PMO is executing, but you could be running so many different reports and tying down your resources of creating you this data that in the end, it may not be that valuable, right? So be aware also with the executives, they will not want the day-to-day reports that you need, right? So they may be just too specific and too much detail, just because they don't want that level of detail. And then finally, software packages, right? They come with tons and tons of reports. Don't ignore those reports, but also make sure that you're not, overthinking this and getting so many reports out there that it just becomes too much information and not valuable. So it's a balance. And so you're going to want to really think about that balance as you progress and start and continue to run your PMO. Make sense? Yeah. So lots of goodness. Reports are critical. Reports are something you definitely got to get going, but don't do too many reports because you'll just get bogged down in that process. Okay, so one of the key components of running a PMO is what do you do day to day, right? How do I spend my time? I've been a project manager for X amount of years. I'm excellent at it, but now I've moved into this PMO role and I don't know what to do. What do I do from a day-to-day basis? Well, what I've done is I've tried to make it super simple or easy for you. And so let's go through that. PMO managers struggle though. When I talk to a lot of them, they struggle. They don't know what to do on a day-to-day basis, right? What reports do I run? How involved do I get in projects? Do I not get involved with projects, right? There's so many questions that come up. And especially new PMO managers, it's so easy to get caught in the details of projects. You start stepping in, you start recommending this and recommending that, and you got to stop. Your role is to look wide and not deep. You have to trust your project managers, your program managers to deliver their own projects, and you have to step away from that. And that was one of the toughest things to do as a PMO manager is start to look wide and not deep and step away from the deep, because many PMO managers are excellent project managers that move into that role, but they have to learn to look deep. Okay, so very, very important, a very important takeaway is start looking deep and not wide, and trust your program and project managers to do the work. So when we think about what we do on a day-to-day basis, we think about running a PMO, one of the most critical deliverables that you can set up is a PMO cadence calendar. Okay, and in that calendar, you're going to basically drive the happenings of your PMO. PMO members, everyone working your PMO, they're to schedule around these key meetings, right? So their project and program meetings will be scheduled around your key meetings, but you need to set up a cadence. You need to set up an environment where you're driving your PMO forward. They're mandatory attendance, right? Your portfolio, program, and project managers must attend your PMO meetings, right? They need that. You need that opportunity for everyone to come together and for you to drive your PMO forward. And this is tough. This is not easy. So pulling everyone together that are out running their various projects into a PMO is a very difficult component, but I've done it for years and I strongly suggest you set it up, and you're going to do that by creating a calendar. It keeps everyone on track. It documents the major events. People schedule around the events, and it's really a great best practice that I strongly suggest you set up. So what's it look like? Well, it's a typical calendar, right? And so you've got the 5 days of the week, you've got review meetings, you've got interdependency meetings, you've got LT meetings, you've got things such as, hey, you all have to submit a status report on Fridays, right? Very simple, but it really helps you drive the cadence of your PMO. And so I think it's very, very important to really drive through and make sure you have this set up and make sure everyone is abiding by this. Put it on a SharePoint, put it in Excel, put it in whatever product you can, but get this as visible as possible so you and your team members can drive to these major events. So once you have that set up and that's going and everyone gets what you have to do Fridays and Thursdays and interdependency meetings and project meetings, now what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to put your projects on that meeting as well. If they're not on there, they're not that important. And so you've got to balance this because it also gets very, very busy, and you'll see that. So once everything's documented, take another view of the calendar and think about, hey, what reports are needed and when are they needed? So let's look at that. So here's your PMO's cadence calendar, but we've added the major programs and projects. Now, if you're running 300-400 projects like I've done in some of the PMOs I've ran, there's no way you can get those all on a calendar. But what you can do is you can, and we'll talk about a priority list, but you can get the top 10 on there or the top 15 on there. Okay. But again, it's all about understanding the cadence of your organization and how you actually, how they actually, things are executing as you go forward. So this is a combination. Yes, I get it. It can be very messy. Again, just a sample. You're going to have to see what it looks like and then just limit it. If you've got the top 10, the top 15 or whatever, let's get those on there so people can schedule around that. But what I love about this is overlapping events. You're going to see that your LT is needed in 4 different places at once. You've got a steerco meeting for 5 projects all happening at 9 o'clock. Well, you can prevent that kind of thing when you have these types of calendars set up. Very, very important, and it allows the executives to know what's going on. It allows you as a PMO manager to see what's tracking, and it allows the other program and project managers to see where everyone else has got things scheduled as well. Simple to do in SharePoint, simple to do in an Outlook calendar, simple to do in the various calendar softwares out there, but I strongly suggest you set up your cadence calendar and then add your key programs and projects on top of that. Okay. And then the other calendar, and I've used this for years as well, is your PMO vacation calendar, right? Getting a calendar set up specifically for when people are out of office, right? Another very, very valuable, you've got 10, 15 program and project managers working for you, get that on a calendar. We've got major go live events. We've got this, we've got Bob's out of office, Mary's out of office, Bill's out of office, whatever the case may be, just get that on a centralized calendar so you can know exactly. Now, when you're scheduling big cadence meetings or big PMO type of meetings, you'll be referring to this calendar quite a bit. And so it's another really good recommendation of getting this thing set up and making sure you know when your resources are in and out of office. Okay, so I strongly suggest setting that up as well because it's very important and one I've used for years and has worked out very, very nicely. Excellent. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to get into running a PMO, the components of running a PMO. We've set up the calendars. We've got some initial reporting going. So what's in your DNA? What's in the DNA of every program, right? Of every PMO? And what are the core foundations of things that we need to set up? So there's 10 things to set up when running a PMO. You want to define your color definitions, set up your CR process, develop your portfolio program and project playbooks, develop your or define your PMO priority list. Number 5, define your weekly checklist, set up your project transition plans, develop PMO templates, develop and execute on all your PMO reporting, right? So any additional, again, that's a continual operation. Number 9, review and select your PMO tools. And then finally, continue to support management value conversations. And we will go into that. But that's a huge list, right? Now, what didn't I say? What didn't I say? I didn't say driving programs and projects. I didn't say helping program and project managers with their specific budget, risks, and issues. No, I didn't say that, but that is a key part of running a PMO as well. But these components that you're seeing, this is the DNA of a good PMO. This is what needs to be set up so you can execute and run a successful PMO going forward. All right, so I'll give you, again, just a minute or so to kind of snapshot that or have a quick look at that. But so valuable to have this set up and have this foundational items, right, established for your PMO so you can run a successful PMO going forward. All right, so what's that look like? So let's go deep into them. So every PMO is going to require key components to executing a PMO, from color definitions to CR processes to playbooks, right? Regardless of what it is, PMO managers are going to need these key items, right? And, you know, without these items, you really will struggle. And as we go through this, it'll make much more sense. But if you don't have CRs and you don't have color definitions set up, and you've got multiple people marching down different paths, you're not running a successful PMO. It'll be all over the place and be uncontrollable. So here's that list again. Not going to drain it. I just wanted to give you that so you can get a little bit more detail, setting up color, setting up CR processes, weekly checklist, templates. Again, graphics versus text people. I just want to make sure you guys saw the details out there. But again, way too much to go through. But those 10 items remain the same. Okay? So let's jump into them. Number 1, color definitions. Can't stress enough how important. What does red mean? What does yellow mean? What does green mean? As a PMO manager, you have to define this, right? You cannot have project managers and program managers defining their own colors. That's not good, that's not scalable, and that's not the experience that you want with your executives and or your customers. Let's give you some examples. Red, project's in trouble. Yellow, project's not on track. Green, everything's fine. Regardless of what the definitions are, doesn't matter what they are. You guys can tweak them, you can adjust them as you go, but you're going to want some color definitions. And you're going to want every program and every project manager to abide by those color definitions. And you can, of course, refine it and you can mature it and you can get way better in this process. But at this point, you're going to want to define it at least at the minimum so everyone is driving the same red, same yellow, and green expectations. Can't stress enough how important it is for everyone to be using color definitions the same way, especially if you've got multiple projects working with a single customer and one project manager comes to that customer with a red condition and another one comes with a different red condition. So I make it into the number 1 on the list because it is one of the most important things to set up. And it's one of the things that we all blow and we all have trouble with. Okay. Number 2, setting up a CR process. Every PMO must have a change request process. Now, we can go into the debates of agile or scaled agile or blah, blah, blah. We can go into that. We can do that later. But every PMO needs a CR process. Even in an agile project, right? If you're deep into a sprint and something major happens, again, we can go into it later. I'd love to have that challenge and that conversation. But once the scope is locked, you have to then have a CR process. Without a change request process, project managers will struggle. I've seen this for years. I don't know how to handle these change. They just don't know what to do. I've seen that happen. Unless you define a process, it can be simple, can be complex. It doesn't matter. You just have to get a process out there and then, of course, tweak it along the way, but get a process set up so you are tracking and your program and project managers have something to follow. Here's a very basic one. Project manager and the customers go over the CR process. Everyone agrees. Great. We've got a CR. We go through the process. Great. Once the CR is approved, you do the work or you don't do the work. Again, it does not have to be complex. It can be very simple. But you establishing a CR process and establishing your program, your project managers following that process is really critical to running a successful PMO, right? Without that, there'll be scope changes and time changes and cost changes and things radically happening that you as a PMO manager won't be able to control. If you have a CR process, your program and project managers get stuck, you at least have them follow this process and then tweak and adjust along the way. So step 2 is really about setting a CR process that everyone can follow. Doesn't have to be complex, doesn't have to be as simple as this one, but again, it's a process nonetheless. Make sense? Excellent. Again, the next step, step 3, is around the portfolio program or project playbooks, right? And so we talk about that in building, but every PMO is going to have a role. They're going to have portfolio managers, they're going to have project managers, they're going to have program managers, they're going to have roles of some type, right? And regardless of the different roles, everyone needs an operating manual. Everyone needs to know what they need to do on a regular basis. Now, we're not talking about micromanaging. We're talking about setting up the foundation of the things that you expect the role to do and perform the same way. If you've got 12, 15 project managers, what are all the project managers doing? Well, you're going to document that in the playbook, right? You're going to want them to do Friday status reports, financial reports, weekly risk management, weekly issue management, weekly whatever the case may be, but you're establishing the foundation. You're telling the portfolio program and project managers what you're expecting out of them as they drive through and they do the work. Okay, so let's look at some examples. So the first will be a portfolio report, right? And I won't drain it, but what are some of the things portfolio managers do? They do scope, they do charter documents, they do dashboards, they have roles and responsibilities, they do work breakdown structures, they have kickoff meetings, right? They manage the portfolio of your organization. And so what you're going to do is you're going to establish a playbook. You're going to have, in this particular example, 10 different components. And then you're going to drive through and you say, these are all the expectations and these are all the things that you want that portfolio manager to do. Okay, so this could be an opportunity where your portfolio manager writes it themselves. You could have multiple portfolio managers depending on how big your PMO is. But again, setting up a playbook is really setting that foundation and setting the expectations of what you want them to do. The next would be a program manager playbook. Again, you often have multiple program managers. What do? They do charters, they do oversight tables, they do benefit tables, they do stakeholder registers and scope reports and program status reports. Again, tons and tons of work of what a program manager would do. Well, you'll establish a playbook. You'll establish what they're supposed to do for the various roles. And so you've got multiple program managers. You know they're following the playbook and they're executing roughly the same, right? And then finally, the project manager playbook. And what would they do? Again, kickoff materials, lessons learned, comm plans, governance, escalation, organizational charts, right? Again, over and over and over. What are the components that you expect your project manager to do as they're executing and driving through on their projects? So I can't stress enough how important that is that they have these playbooks in place to then realize and go back to and say, hey, what are color definitions? What's my CR process? What status or what agenda template do I use in my various status meetings? All of that information can be in a playbook, and they just literally go off and find that information and then use it for their projects. I've used playbooks for years. I can't stress enough how important they are. They take a little while to set up. I cranked them out. But again, these are really good components to set up and get them established, and you'll be surprised on how valuable these folks and your folks find them on when they're executing on their projects. Hey, here's the playbook. Here's all the color definitions. Here's the CR process, whatever the case may be. And again, you've got 10 examples there, 10 for portfolio and 10 for program management to really help you define and set up these books for the respective roles. Are there other roles? Certainly. Do the other roles expect playbooks? They certainly do. For example, I had a project coordinator role, and we created a project coordinator playbook. So just important to have playbooks in place for the various roles on your projects. Okay? All right. The next is and then step 4 is your priority list. Every PMO needs a priority list. I can't stress this enough. I actually learned this the hard way. I was running a PMO. I just had taken over a PMO. There was no priority list set up. And I'd literally have people come into my office saying, I don't know what to work on. I don't know what to assign my team. And I'd first start with, are you kidding me? And they'd say, no, there's no priority list. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to assign my resources. I said, okay, so no problem. Obviously, the last PMO manager didn't establish a priority list. So I learned the hard way. You got to have a priority list and make sure that priority list is updated, validated with your executives, because you'd be surprised on how often people rely on this priority list to really understand what they're working on. They'll make trade-off decisions, right? Hey, I've got to work a little bit later. This one's more important than this one. I'm going to work on this higher priority item. It happens all the time, and you'd be surprised how many PMO managers and how many PMOs don't have a simple priority list. It's got to be visible. Your executives have to have a constant pulse on it. If things get hot, things get cold, they can change the priority. But you're going to want a priority list and establish a priority list as soon as possible when you run your PMO, because you'll run into these nightmare conversations. I don't know where to put my people. I've got people rolling off. I don't know what to do with them. Go to the priority list, look at the work, see how they can help on the higher priority items. Such a simple component, such a simple thing. I've done it for years. I hadn't done it at the time I took over that PMO, but it's a critical component and something I strongly suggest you set up as well. Here it is. It's simple. It does not have to be that complicated. Here's your ID, here's your name, here's your priority, here's a color, here's a go live date. Simple. 5 different columns. You've got a priority. You put it up on a SharePoint site. You put it up in a common repository. You put it in a place that people can get to. When you have those conversations, you point them to the priority list. You would be surprised how many people come to you and say, I don't know what to work on because I don't know what's the priority. Strongly suggest you set this up and get this going for your PMO as soon as possible. Okay, and it doesn't have to be complex, right? It can be very, very simple, just as simple as you're seeing here. Okay, so step 5 in the process is about getting a PMO weekly checklist set up, right? So what are you expecting your staff to do? So if you're running a directive PMO and you're saying thou shalt do this, thou shalt do that, these weekly checklists are critical. But let's just think about the weekly checklist in general. What do you expect your program and project managers to do on a weekly basis? Well, we just gave them a massive playbook, right? 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 pages, whatever the case may be for those 10 areas, and you've documented those 10 areas. But they're not going to lug around the playbook, and you're not going to expect everything in the playbook to be done every week. So what do? You take components of that playbook and you say, here's what I expect. I want a weekly status report. I want you to update your schedule weekly. I want a risk and issues updated on the SharePoint site or your project site weekly. right? You pull the critical things from the playbook and you set the expectations to your PMO program and project managers. These are the things that I expect you to do on a weekly basis. Okay, now there's no right or wrong number here, right? You're not going to certainly say, hey, take all 10 components and do all 10 all week. They're going to hate you. But it's going to depend on the maturity of your PMO members, and it's going to depend on that kind of rigor that you want to put or not put on a weekly basis on your staff. So too much, and they're going to hate you. Too little, and you've got Wild West, so there's a balance. But establishing a weekly checklist will really help your program and project managers know exactly what they're expected to do on a weekly basis. And so I can't stress that enough. It can't be everything in the playbook. It's got to be a subset, but it's really a good component and a good thing that you're going to pull some of these items to really help understand what they'll be delivering on a week-to-week basis. Okay? The next step in the process is transition plans. So what's a transition plan? Well, it's a document that describes all the key areas of a project for one PMO or for one project manager to take over from another. Every project needs a transition plan, right? Even if the project manager is not leaving, set up a transition plan. What you want to do as a PMO manager is you want to be able to allow handoffs to happen very, very quickly. I started this maybe 15 or so, 17 or so years ago. And basically, this is when contractors were bouncing around PMOs like crazy. So I'd have 5, 6, 7 project manager contractors working for me in my PMO, and they'd say, okay, I'm leaving the next day. And I go, oh, right? They'd go off to the next job. Well, the economy's like that now, and contract project managers are bouncing around, and I'm seeing that bouncing around again happening. So if you set up a transition plan, when one project manager leaves and another project manager comes on, or one contractor leaves unexpectedly, they'd have all the key components of their project documented, allowing another project manager to quickly take over. As a PMO manager running multiple projects, especially with vendors, but employees nowadays as well, I strongly suggest you set up a transition plan. Have that transition plan in place and allowing transitions from one project to another. And the key is you do it when they're not leaving. You make sure every PMO or every project manager has a transition plan for their projects, and you have that conversation. Will they need to update it occasionally? Yes, they will. But will it make it so much easier when they decide to leave for you to, as a PMO manager, to put another project manager on it and allow them to take over and basically take over their projects? So what's in it? They don't have to be complex. They don't have to have a ton of information in them. This is not a huge burden. It's all about you covering yourself for when one leaves or another one has to take over. Location of project documents, key links, key meetings, calendars, events. I love those calendars. Stakeholders, distribution lists, right? What would one PM need to take over another person's project? Again, don't get caught without transition plans. Very, very, very important. All right. People move, people leave all the time. And you as a PMO manager that's responsible for the bucket of work, you're going to want to make sure that your people that are managing these projects document these key items to allow another person to take over at any time. And so, again, it's very, very important that you set up and you really drive for your organization. What do you guys think? Is anyone using transition plans? Okay. Some no's there, some yeses. Yeah. Again, so very, very important to get these set up and get these established for your project managers today before they leave, because you as a PMO manager, you want that transition to happen as soon as possible or as easy as possible. Okay, the next step in the process is templates and reports. And we talked briefly about reports earlier, but this is about getting the execution going. And then we want to talk about templates. So what do we mean about templates? Well, you're a PMO, you're an organization, and you're going to want a branding. You're going to want to look and feel. You're going to want to establish a color scheme. You're going to want to establish a brand for your organization. So 2 things, templates and reports. Let's start with templates. When you think about templates, every PMO will require a set of templates. Kickoff meetings, go, no-go decks, go live decks, emails, templates, right? These are just some of the templates, but there can be tons and tons of templates. But what you're wanting to do here is you're wanting to establish a template for your program and your project managers to use, but you're going to also want to establish the branding and the color scheme, right? And so you want all colors to go out with blue and gray or whatever the case may be. It's your organization, it's your branding. And so you want every deck to be the same, every go live to be the same, every email to have the same logo on it, whatever the case may be, right? But it's your organization. And so from a template perspective, definitely establish the templates. You don't want 25 different go live decks or go live emails or kickoff decks. You don't want those. You want one established template that they can all your program and project managers can use, right? But then think about the branding on that. And a lot of people will just throw together these decks, but the color schemes will be wrong and they'll be all different. You don't want that. As an established PMO running a successful PMO, you want that branding to be the same. Everyone uses this color, everyone uses this font, right? And so what does that do? Well, your executives get the same experience across every program and project manager. Your customer gets the same experience, right? Everyone wants to be creative and everyone wants to have their own styles. I get that. But you as a PMO manager, you're trying to run and control multiple programs and projects. You want that same look and feel. I've done this for years. It really is helpful to have the decks so people can turn to, but really taking the colors and the fonts and all that stuff, you want to take that off their plate and just say, use these fonts, use this template, and then put your project and program material. So really, really important around a template perspective is really think about the branding. And then, of course, we look at the reports, right? Same sets of reports in the program project and portfolio spaces. Again, we talked about that. But again, ultimately, you're going to go to dashboarding, and you're going to have portfolio dashboards, program dashboards, and project dashboards where applicable. But you really want to start establishing and keeping that as a continual process. And so we talked about that before, but ultimately the goal will be to get to dashboarding, okay? All right, so the next step in the process is around PMO tools. So when you think about PMO tools, right, it's gonna depend on how mature your organization is, and even from a funding perspective, what kind of funding do you have available? What kind of funding will your executives provide you? Because PMOs need tools. Right? You could have portfolio management, program management, project management. You're going to need tools. And so what tools will you establish? So we talk about this in the building, right? We say in the building of PMO, you have to have a set of tools. Well, in the running of a PMO is what you're going to do is you're going to try these tools. You're going to test these tools, right? You're going to go and you're going to do a sampling. You'll get, hey, 10 copies of this tool. Let's try that. Across portfolio management, across program and project management, hundreds and hundreds of tools available. Don't buy every tool out there, right? Very, very important. Every a salesperson of these tools will try to sell you that they're the magic bullet and they will do a ton of different goodness, and some do, some don't. Get that. But one of the key components of building and bringing in tools is to understand the processes that are associated to those tools and the data entry that's associated to those tools and the reporting that's associated, right? To bring in something like CompuWare or UMT or Clarify, whatever the case may be, to bring those products in, they come with a ton of process, right? And your organization may or may not be ready for that process. So it's really, really important that you understand the processes and the tools and the reporting that are all together when you bring a tool like that in. Don't buy every tool out there. Don't get sold on it. Bring tools in as you can handle, and your organization can handle the maturity of that. Make sense? Yeah, excellent. Okay, so the last is the management value conversation. So what is this? What is this conversation? Well, this is a conversation that is a core component of every PMO manager from the beginning of time. So what do we mean by that? Your management, your executive layer will continue to say, what's the value of your PMO? What do you do for me? Why do you cost so much? Why do your tools cost so much? I get no value out of this. One of the key components of being a successful PMO manager is to have this conversation and to continue to have this conversation and have this conversation that you actually know the value you're bringing. Running a successful PMO will require this conversation multiple times. It's your elevator pitch. It's your elevator pitch plus one. It's really selling what you're doing and the value your organization's bringing, because as a PMO manager, you will have this conversation over and over and over again. I can't stress enough how you have to be prepared for this conversation. Okay? So critical. I make it this 10th step of the process because it's one that I've dealt with for years and years and years. And it's one that you will deal with when running a successful PMO. So have your elevator speech, have that ready to speak to, and be prepared to speak to it on a regular basis. That's it, right? So let's summarize, right? We talked about the 10 components. We defined the color definitions. We set up the CR. We did our playbooks. We looked at our priority list. We said, hey, what do we expect them to do weekly? We have a transition plan for people rolling in and rolling out. We have templates. We understand the value of branding and having templates ready for our people. We keep executing on reports. Now we're looking at tools and we're bringing in tools. We're looking at what tools we can use, maybe piloting a couple, what's working, what's not working. And then we have that value management conversation. That's a ton of work, right? I can't stress enough, that's a ton of work. But again, these are the foundational steps. You add the 12 for building a PMO. Now you add the 10 here of running a PMO, and you're going to be in a really good place to run a successful PMO going forward. So we covered 10 areas in running a PMO from a day-to-day basis. Tons of items there, right? And these are critical. These are critical to set up. And what's a good thing about them is they're valid regardless of the industry. Right? Construction has CRs. Construction has color. Construction has resources, right? Manufacturing, research, right? Think about those 10 areas and think that they're not just software. They're applicable across everything. And as a PMO manager, you need to think and understand on how they're applicable. This is just not a software conversation. This is a PMO conversation. Take the time, build out these areas. Right? Build out the 12 from building, build out the 10 from running, and you're set yourself up to running a successful PMO. Okay? Again, all questions I'll take at the end. I can't do them right now. So PMO resources. So when we looked at that round circle a minute or so, or a couple minutes back, actually, we said there's really 4 components. Right? So we talked about reporting and then specific reporting. Then we got into the day-to-day, but we got to think about our resources. What can we do from a PMO resource perspective? It's so important. Here's that circle, and we're basically at number 4. And what I strongly suggest you set up as your mentoring and your buddy system. Okay? So one of the areas that PMO managers want to get set up and want to get going as soon as possible is either a formal PMO mentoring program or a lighter touch informal buddy system, right? The mentoring program, much more formal. It's tied to performance reviews. It's often ran out of the HR department, where a buddy system's less formal, right? But actually can often be much more successful. I've ran multiple buddy systems. I've ran mentoring systems as well, but I've ran multiple buddy systems. They tend to be a little more fun. They don't have that HR side of things. You as a PMO manager, you can control them. But again, it's something that you should set up and establish right away. Okay, so let's look at both these. Right, let's spend the time. Let's look at the mentoring system and the buddy system. And really what I love about these, and really the reason why you're doing them, is you're giving your resources a place to go to help them successfully deliver your projects. Okay, I certainly, when you set up a buddy system or even a mentoring system, but when you set these systems up, your resources are saying, hey, I now have a place to go where I'm stuck or I have a trouble and I don't know what to do. And again, as a PMO manager, your resources are not going to want to run back to you for every particular question. And so what you're doing is you're establishing these two systems to allow them to go to someone else to help them with their problems. So let's look at the mentoring system. Many companies will offer mentoring programs that pair employees with like careers, right, to help grow with one another. Right, so PMOs should have mentoring programs as well. Either if they're just part of the PMO, that's fine, or they can go and they can be part of the HR offerings. It doesn't matter. But you as a PMO manager, you want to put something in place like that. They're very formal in nature, usually last for 1 year or longer, right? But you as a PMO manager, you want to drive that and get that established and going for your organization. Very formal, right? Tied to performance review. But what you see in a mentor-mentee, you see that mentor-mentee relationship. You've got a person that is a mentor and you've got a person that's a mentee that's getting that mentoring. So very, very formal. The buddy system, a little less formal, fewer rules, fewer restrictions, right? And what it does is it pairs like roles together, right? But the key to this is that they can bounce ideas and share concerns and really act as a sounding board. But the key to this is that no one is the mentor, right? No one takes the leadership role. I love these buddy systems. I've ran them for years. They are so successful. People love them. They love being buddied up together, right? They love that concept because they have a person they can ask. If you've got a project manager buddied with another project manager, they can go and talk to them. Hey, I got a problem with my project. Hey, I got this problem. Hey, I got that problem. What do you do? What would you do, right? So buddy systems you control as a PMO manager, less formal, but they are so successful and they're really wonderful. And so some of the things to consider though, right, is they want to commit to a certain amount of time. So there has to be a commitment, even 3 months, 6 months, whatever, but there's got to be a commitment from both parts. They share ideas, they share suggestions. They commit to 1 or 2 buddy meetings a month, right? So this isn't a huge burden, but it allows someone to go talk to another person and bounce some questions off them. But no one takes the leadership role, right? They are buddies, they're working buddies. Another thing that we do is we often create buddy systems with folks that are offshore. And so you've got an offshore buddy, onshore, offshore buddy. And so people that are offshore, they have a buddy onshore. It really helps bring the two worlds together and connects the two worlds. So if we work with folks in India, for example, we pair them with onshore people, and that connects those worlds a lot closer. And so one of the things you can do in that buddy system is these are the kinds of things you can do because they're less formal and you as a PMO manager drive those. So I just want to kind of put those out there because there's 2 very valuable systems, and valuable systems I strongly suggest you set up and run as well. Okay. So as we finalize right on our resources, we cover 2 critical tools or critical, and they really are tools, but we'll call them systems that you guys should establish. The mentoring system, more formal, possibly working with HR, but sometimes you need that mentor-mentee relationship because you've got a junior project manager that needs to be aligned to someone more formal, or you've got the buddy system where you as a PMO manager control and you really drive that going forward. But supporting your team members is critical, right? Supporting your team members so they've got a person that they can turn to is so, so valuable. And then they're not always running to you. Okay. So as we wrap up, we've covered a number of areas of running a PMO, right? And we've talked about the 10 critical areas, from the colors all the way down to management value conversation. Each of these components are critical in successfully running your PMO. I can't stress that enough. And then don't underestimate how much time you'll have on that number 10, right? That value conversation, because it's going to be something that will come up with your executives, your management team, and it's going to be a daily thing where you've got to be prepared for it and got to have that conversation. Okay. More information, definitely come check out my book, The PMO Lifecycle, Building, Running, and Shutting Down, where we talk about industry-leading PMOs, agile PMOs, day-to-day operations, shutting down, dashboards and reportings. All that information is in my brand new book, The PMO Lifecycle Running Down, which is up and available on Amazon today. Okay. A book will only take you so far, right? And so a book is great. There's a lot of great material in there. And so I got a question for the group is, can I show you guys something that I think will help you really walk through the next stage of running down, building, running, or shutting down a PMO? You guys want to see that? Okay. It's called the PMO Lifecycle, Building, Running, Shutting Down online class. Okay. And so in this class, you have 19 modules. So this is a standalone class that will walk you through building a PMO, running a PMO, and shutting down a PMO. We've got workbooks and tools that are not available to anyone else. You can't download them. You can't get them. We've got dashboards. We've got lifetime access. We have group webinars only for people on the call. We've got live calls. We also have a private Facebook group. It's the only online class that's got a private Facebook group where you will align with other PMO managers and get the help and support you need through building, running, and shutting down. Now, there's 19 modules, and everyone's like, well, that's a ton of modules. That's a ton of modules. Well, it is. But again, these modules are about building a PMO and the 12 steps there, running a PMO and the 10 steps there, and then shutting down a PMO. So yeah, there's a lot of modules, but they're very easy to consume. They're very light touch. And you've got this component where you walk through the modules and you walk through the tools to go through that. So as you are building, running, or shutting down, there's workbooks and tools to follow. So really proud of this course because it really will give you the information you need. Here's what it looks like. You go in, you run the modules on the left. Private Facebook group, ongoing support. And so we've got 3 payment options, right? So you can just do a one-time payment, but you'll see there's no access to the Facebook group or the webinars or the coaching. We've got a professional version where you get access to absolutely everything, or there's an ongoing monthly as well. And so the monthly release, you get limited access, but you get in all cases, you get all 19 modules and you get all the downloads. So it's something to consider for 3 different pricing points. And it depends. Do you want to join private Facebook groups and have webinar calls and get on calls with other PMO managers where you can get the support you need? Or you don't, you just want to go through the materials. Here's some of the workbooks. And so we've got company profile information. You've got PMO decision charts. So these are all available. These are the things that you will follow and you will go through as you execute on the course. Here's your Facebook group. We do things like red flags. We ask questions. We get feedback. There's lots and lots of discussions between the two. And so it's all really there to establish and help you drive your PMO from building it, running it, or even shutting it down. This is a courses page, dowpublishingllc.com/courses. You can log in today and get that. One of the folks, what I'm going to do for folks that buy today, I will also send them a free book. And so if you guys jump on there today, I'll get you a copy of my book, The PMO Lifecycle, Building, Running, and Shutting Down. You don't need the book for the course. It's a standalone course, but it would definitely be very helpful to refer back and forth to it, but you don't necessarily need it. The other thing I'll do is, if you're not sure, you're really stuck, get a call going with me. Set up the call. We'll go 15 minutes, we'll go 30 minutes, whatever the case may be. We'll talk about the course. We'll go deep dive into the course, and we'll walk you through and make sure you understand exactly what the course is and what it's doing. But great reviews on the course. We've had a number of people review it and provide great feedback on it. And it will give you what you need to build, run, and shut down a PMO. Excellent. So what I'm going to do is open it up for questions in a minute here. I know there's a number on the chat, and let's jump through that. My name is Bill Dow. Get me at BillDow@DowPublishingLLC.com. Here are my 3 books on Amazon. And thank you all today for hanging in there with me and going through it. And I'm certainly glad we was able to share all this information with you.